Hello, I'm going to be talking about a topic tonight that's a little bit different than the material I usually share, but I have recently started doing some biblical life coaching. It kind of flows really well with my background. So, several years ago, I got a master's in social work, and I worked for a few years as a child and family therapist. And because of how sick I was back at that time, mentally and physically, I was only able to work for a couple years. And so I quit and I never returned to the field. And recently, I really started looking into, just some different things that the Lord was laying on my heart and some different directions that I felt Him moving. And one of them was biblical life coaching. So I've started doing a little bit of that. What I've noticed is that many of us, and this is an area that even though I know about it, it's still an area that if I'm not super aware of it, I can definitely stumble and mess up and need to create and maintain new patterns. And it's an area that I think a lot of us struggle in, and that's communication. So I want to just share some healthy communication skills so that we can better our relationships and so that we can learn to talk to each other in a more meaningful way. Because I think many times if we communicated better, there would be less misunderstandings, maybe less arguments, hopefully less arguments, and it would lead to more healthy dynamics in our homes, our churches, our families, and just in our lives in general, workplace, everywhere. So, first, what I want to talk about is the difference between being assertive and aggressive. Those two things are very, very different. Assertive means it means communicating with others in a direct and honest manner without intentionally hurting anyone's feelings. Direct communication, if done in a good way, minus aggression, can reduce conflict, build self confidence, and enhance personal and work relationships. So we can be assertive without being aggressive because assertiveness in and of itself just means you are direct and you're honest and you don't try to hurt people's feelings. You're not out for blood, but you are very direct and you're very honest in what you are saying with no intent to hurt each other's feelings. Aggression, on the other hand, is hostile and violent. It's a attitude toward other people, and it results with a readiness to attack or confront. The action or act of attacking without provocation, forceful, and sometimes overly assertive pursuit of one's aims and interests. So we can be walking the line of assertiveness, and if we're not careful, it can go into aggressiveness. So we just need to keep that in mind. It's okay to be assertive, but we don't want to be aggressive. We want to be assertive, which is being clear, direct, honest, without intentionally hurting the feelings of others, and avoid aggression, even on hot topics. We don't have to fall into aggression. If people don't agree with us, that's okay. We can agree to disagree and move on. We don't have to become aggressive. We can, sometimes we just have to. I was trying to think of, like, in my life, there's so many times with the things that I teach and the things that I post on social media, it rubs people the wrong way. I post different things and it does not always go over well. And there's a lot of times, well, not a lot of times, most of the time in the past, if someone had said something against my belief system or, what I think, I would be ready to give it right back at them because I would want to prove my point of why I'm right. The Holy Spirit has really been teaching me to look at my heart and what is my motive behind what I'm saying to somebody. Am I saying it just to prove a point because I want to be right? Or is it covered in love? Whenever we are being aggressive, that is not covered in love. That is coming from a place of I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm going to show you why you're wrong. That's coming from a place of my way or no way. Sometimes it's coming from a place of being unteachable because we can learn something from other people. Even if we're not from the same background, if we don't believe the same way, we can still learn things from other people who are different than us. We have to always approach that with an open mind and not be so closed off to people who believe differently and think that they have nothing to offer, because that's not the truth at all. We can learn from other people. Now, do we want to change our belief systems and start listening to false religions? No, I'm not talking about that. We don't want to do those things. We don't want to be open to being taught about false religions or twisted doctrine, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about on a personal level, we can learn from each other. We can both be assertive without being aggressive. And we need to fight fair. That means we need to be the bigger person no matter what the other people do. We do not have to always one-up each other. We don't always have to have the last word. We don't have to be the smartest. We don't have to be the one to snap back and let them have it. We don't even have to fight at all. We can disengage. It is so easy to disengage, whether in person or on the internet. We do not have to engage. You cannot fight if two people aren't active. A fight cannot happen with only one person. And so we have to be the ones to disengage every time, whether it's in the home, whether it's online, whether it's in the workplace, the church, the community. If you disengage, the fight ends. So we have to be the ones who say the fight ends with me, because I'm not going to engage in that. If the other person is overly aggressive, there's no reason to continue at all. If you both are overly aggressive, you both need to go to your own corners and calm down. So that means no name calling and no being passive aggressive. And I'm going to talk about passive aggressiveness. The definition is a way of expressing negative emotions in indirect ways. Passive aggression involves a series of nonverbal or verbal and evasive techniques that indicate discontent without ever saying it. Passive aggression can include denial, distortion, cruelty, and silence. It's defined as behavior that is seemingly accidental or neutral, but that indirectly displays an unconscious aggressive motive. So, have you heard the term gaslighting? So when someone gaslights you, they turn it around and make like everything's your fault, or they act like that they're not doing anything wrong, but they're being passive aggressive and they're getting their little digs in. They're not really listening. They're not communicating in a healthy manner. They're very toxic, but they're turning it around to make it look like they haven't done anything, that they're not the bad guy, you are. So you have to be really careful that you're not passive aggressive, and you have to be really careful that the person you're dealing with, if they're passive aggressive, disengage immediately. So I'm going to give you some examples of passive aggressive behavior. Passive aggressive behavior. One is they ghost you, or they just seemingly disappear. If you say something they don't like, they can react by just disappearing. You can be in a conversation and they just stop talking. If they're at your house, they can just leave. They can give you the silent treatment. They use the silent treatment and disappearance as a way of punishing. So if you start saying things that they just don't like, they disengage. And it's not that they're disengaging because they don't want an argument. They're disengaging because they don't like what you're saying. They don't like your honesty. They don't like your point of view. They don't like what you have to say. So instead of being an adult about it and talking it out, they disengage as a way of punishing you to correct your behavior. So they don't want you to talk about those topics. They don't want you to ask them to do those things. They don't want you to hold them accountable. So they disengage and give you the silent treatment to try to get you off balance and to get you off of the topic that you're on. The next one is like they may give you a backhanded compliment. So they may say something like, "Oh, wow, I saw you did the dishes and you did such a good job, and I was really surprised." Is that really a compliment? No, they just undid it. They undid it by saying they were surprised. Or, "That looks like a really nice outfit. I didn't think it would fit you." Anything that's offhand like that, it comes out at first sounding, "Oh, that was really nice." And we may even at first take it and be like, "Oh, wow, they're so nice." And then we walk away and we're like, "Oh, wait a minute. I think they just did a dig at us." And it can come off in so many different ways. Many times it's much more subtle, but there's always that little dig in there. The next one is they may indirectly refuse your request. So you may ask them to do something or to stop doing something, and they may not say no, but they never do it. So if you ask them not to talk to you a certain way, they may act like they're listening to you. They may act like they're right there with you. They may act like they agree, but then they continue the behavior. Or the exact opposite. If you're like a boss at work and you tell them to do something, they may act like they're going to do it, like, oh yeah, 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 and then you walk away and they never do it. That's passive aggressiveness. The next one is they may procrastinate. They may just never get around to doing it. And there are people who procrastinate and they're not being passive aggressive. But when it falls underneath the passive aggression, they know when you're telling them to do something or to stop doing something that they're not going to do it. They know they're not going to, but they just act like they're going along with you, all along knowing they're not going to do it. The other one is that they make excuses rather than say what's on their mind. So you may see like something's wrong, you can tell something's wrong, but they will never have an honest conversation about it. They will just say, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, I used to do this in my marriage. I would so obviously not be fine. I would be slamming cabinets. I would be closing doors too loud. I would be throwing things around. And then Ronnie would say, what's going on? Nothing. I'm fine. Obviously, I'm not fine. I was very, very passive. Well, I was aggressive and passive aggressive. And so when it don't mix, when the person's behavior and them saying they're fine doesn't mix, that's passive aggressiveness. Because what are we trying to do? We're trying to make the other person figure us out. We're trying to make them feel guilty for something that they've done. We're trying to let them know that they messed up, that everything is not okay, but we ain't even going to talk about it. It's control and it's manipulation and it's wrong. And we shouldn't act that way. When something upsets us, we need to be open and honest and assertive and say, this is what's on my heart. This is what's going on. If we need a timeout, there's nothing wrong with that. But when someone says what's wrong, we need to be honest about it and not just passive aggressive. The next one is they will give you the silent treatment for no apparent reason. And when you talk about what's bothering them, they won't tell you how they feel. So this is kind of a little bit different. It may not just be like they're punishing you. They may just shut down and just not speak to you at all. They pout, sigh loudly, or otherwise exhibit behaviors that they're not happy, but they won't express to you why they're unhappy. So it's like it always holds you hostage, thinking, why are they unhappy? What did I do? What can I do different? We should not treat each other this way. This is not okay. They may complain about situations with other people that bother them as a means to indirectly say that they're unhappy when the same situation occurs with you. So, for example, in a marriage, if I'm mad at my husband because he didn't take the trash out, instead of me saying to him, Ronnie, I really wanted you to take the trash out. I didn't feel like doing it, and it kind of hurt my feelings when you didn't do it because it made me feel like you didn't care. Now, I'm not sure if that's what the situation was, but that's kind of how it made me feel. And then waiting for his reply. Instead, it would be saying something like, yeah, you know Bob and Karen, he didn't take the trash out for her the other day, and boy, was she mad. And I get exactly what she's saying because he didn't care nothing about her. He knew she'd had a long day. He knew she was tired. He knew it was too heavy for her, but instead of coming home and taking it out, he just came home and he sat down on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world and blah, 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 blah. That's an example of we can be complaining about the person with us, but using somebody else as an example instead of just directly saying how we feel. Another symptom or sign of passive aggressiveness is keeping score, talking about how they do so many things for other people, yet they don't get the same treatment in return. That you can keep score against your spouse, against your kids, against your coworkers, against the folks at church, keeping score and always repeating about why the other person owes you or why you do so much more. It's kind of like the martyr syndrome. I do everything and nobody does nothing for me. If that is happening to you, you either lack boundaries in your life or you're not telling people how you feel. Complaining about it and talking about it to other people never fixes the situation. What fixes it is to have healthy boundaries in your life. And when you feel like people are taking advantage of you, have conversations where you are honest with them and you say that. And the last one is repeatedly making excuses to avoid certain people as a way of expressing their dislike or anger toward those individuals instead of confronting the issue and talking it out. So everything about lacking assertiveness, and open, honest conversation. That's what we hear when we hear these examples. So we want to make sure that we're not acting passive aggressive. So I want to share some examples with you now of how you can have healthy communication. These aren't all of them, but there's some of them. And if you start implementing these in your life, I think you will notice a big difference in how you communicate, how you feel about your communication, and the level of health in your relationships. And we can't change anybody else. So if you have somebody else in your life and you're saying, well, I would really like for them to start doing this, you can share these with them and say, I think we need work in this area. I think we could really implement these in our relationship. But the bottom line is you can only change yourself. You can model the behavior for other people. So if they see you changing your way of communication, hopefully and prayerfully, it will challenge them to change their way too. So number one is use I statements versus you statements. And there's a very distinct difference here. You make me angry. You never do anything right. Why do you always do it that way? Why do you always upset me? Why can't you hear me? Why don't you listen? Very aggressive, very confrontational. And that right there will cause people to put their defenses up the very first you that you get out of your mouth. It can cause people to shut down immediately and get anywhere. Here's an example of an I statement. I need, I want, and I feel. I need to feel loved in this relationship. I want to feel loved in this relationship. I feel like I'm unloved. I need to communicate better. I need to have you hear me when we talk. I want you to put your phone down so that I know that you're really hearing me. Hear the difference between that versus you never listen to me. You never put your phone down when I'm trying to talk to you. You don't even look up. What is wrong with you? Why can't you talk to me? Huge difference. I need, I want, and I feel versus you. The next one is to be clear in your words and communication. Don't expect the listener to figure out your meaning. If you feel like they're not understanding what you're trying to express to them, ask them what they hear you saying. Make sure also that there's not a demonic influence trying to twist your words or the listener's ears. You can pause for a minute and do some spiritual warfare and command every spirit of division, every spirit of miscommunication to be silent in the name of Jesus. Now, how that presents is you are saying one thing and the person gets absolutely nothing that you are saying. Over and over and over. There can be spiritual warfare involved because the enemy comes only to kill, steal, and destroy, John 10:10. So we know that the enemy wants to steal our marriages, wants to steal our families, wants to destroy our churches. Does the enemy affect communication? Absolutely. He wants you to hear offensive things. He wants you to pick up a spirit of offense. He wants you to be offended. And he wants the people that you're talking to be offended. So when you are having any type of real conversation, they can be there, they as in demons, trying to stir up discord between you and the other person. So doing spiritual warfare is an amazing idea. I do it all the time in my home. I am not allowing none of that garbage in my house in the name of Jesus. So another thing is to make sure that you are not wanting the other person to get you and understand you without making yourself clear. There are times that we want our spouse to be a mind reader. We just want them to get it. We want them to walk in and take a glance at us and know that we need them to do this, and this. But they're not mind readers. They don't know. They don't get it every single time, and they shouldn't have to try. We should not put them in a place of always trying to figure out what we are thinking. And they shouldn't do that to us either. We should be able to have open, honest communication that says, I need, I want, I feel. Because we should not be having the other person have to guess about what we need, want, or feel. We need to be clear and concise, and we need to have those open and honest conversations. And it's not just with our spouse, it's with everybody. Nobody can get in our head and know exactly what we need when we need it except God. That's it. Nobody else can do that. We should not be wanting people to guess. If we need something, we need to make that clear. We also need to make our meaning clear because there's so many misunderstandings. And it comes from not saying back to the person, I hear you saying. Is that it? Is that accurate? Because if you do that, That right there will clear up so much of the communication issues. And whenever they say back to you, I hear you saying this. No, that's not what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. And go back and forth as many times as you need to until you understand each other. The next one is to think about what you say before you speak, but listen to the other speaker to understand and not respond. Also give yourself time to think before you speak. Don't listen for responding. When someone is speaking to you, don't listen to them only to respond. Don't be thinking of your response as they're talking. Listen to understand. You are listening to understand their point of view. You are listening to understand their feeling. You're listening to understand their meaning. And if that means whenever it's your turn to talk, you need to say, give me just a second to get my thoughts together, do that. But so many times when the other person is talking, we're thinking, what are we going to say? How are we going to say it? Well, that ain't right. I know this is right. I'm going to say this. Well, I got point 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10, and I'm going to come back at them as soon as it's my turn. We need to calm all that down and listen for understanding. When we speak before we think, you're likely going to respond based on emotions. We don't want to respond out of emotion. Take a few breaths, pray for direction, then respond from a place of truth and not emotion. As you are listening to other persons speak, put aside your own thoughts and feelings and focus on trying to understand their meaning, their needs, their wants, their feelings, and intentions. Express empathy as needed. Don't ever listen for a comeback. To be making in your mind your stance, what you want to say, how you want to say it, how you want to get it across. Calm down, take a few breaths, listen for their meaning, and then respond. Reflect back to them their meaning to make sure you understand what they're saying. So, for example, you would say something like, it sounds like you're saying to me, and then reflect back what they've said. Not word for word, reflect back meaning. So if your husband comes home, and this could work for any relationship, it's just really easy to do husbands and wives. If your husband comes home and he looks around the house, and that day you've been super busy and the house is a mess, there's no dinner cooked, whatever's going on, and your husband walks in the door and he says, this house is trashed. I can't believe after working all day, I come home and the house is a mess. You could reflect back and say, it sounds like you're saying to me that you're disappointed that after working really hard all day, you came in and the house wasn't what you thought it should be. Or the house wasn't a place for you to relax because it's a mess. I'm reflecting back what I think his meaning is. I'm not going so far off script that I'm out in left field coming up with my own response or coming up with what is I'm inferring that he's saying. I'm trying to put meaning to his words that I think he feels. And then he can say, no, that's not exactly what I meant. I just wish the house had been clean because I'm tired. Oh, okay. I get what you're saying. Yeah. And then today's been a rough day for me too. And then you go on about your business. But when you reflect back for meaning, you're making sure the both of you are on the same page and that you understand what the speaker is saying, because so many times we're ready to fly off the handle. How easy would that be to say, well, you don't know about my day. You don't know what all I've been through. I've been doing this, and this. And then you come in the door and you just add to the problem. Instead of staying calm and saying, it sounds like you're saying this. I get it. I've had a rough day too. We can spend our evening and had a rough day together or whatever it is. Because when we're really trying to listen for understanding, it takes away a lot of the miscommunication. And we can get offended because we don't understand the meaning behind words. My husband, I have to interpret for him, for most people around him, because people don't get him. They do not get the meaning a lot of times that he has behind his words. He says one thing, and because I know him and I know his heart, I know that's not what he means whatsoever. And we've been married for 21 years, so I kind of know how to speak his language. And there's some people that are just like that. Like they will say something, and if we took it at face value, we could be so offended. But then once we really ask them, well, can you explain that further? Like, I'm not getting you. I'm not getting what you're saying. And then they say it a deeper, different way. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. And that can take care of so many issues. So if you're correct in what they're saying, move forward in the conversation. If you're not correct, ask them to explain further. Many times there's breakdowns in communication because we don't understand what the person is trying to communicate. We assume the wrong thing behind their words. On one or one of both parties have a difficulty expressing their feelings, intentions, and meanings in words. Avoid jumping to conclusions. Try to find out the facts before you form an opinion. Don't jump to conclusions because you may have no idea what they're trying to say. Give them an opportunity to express themselves. And if it's somebody that has difficulty expressing themselves, give them space and give them time and give them enough back and forth that they feel comfortable that they can express themselves. Especially if it's someone who is used to not being understood, they may just want to go on and not even try. But when you start practicing this and you start really trying to listen for understanding, it may really help them open up. Also, always be aware of the tone of your voice and your facial expression, especially if you're often misunderstood based on them. There are times we can be deep in thought, but the listener can think that we are actually mad because of our facial expression or our tone, which can cause them to go on the offensive right from the start before we even try to have a conversation. So we need to be aware of what our face looks like. We need to be aware of what our tone sounds like. There's a lot of times used to be, I just had a not so great look on my face most of the time. I was very unapproachable a lot of times. And it wasn't because I didn't want people to approach me, or it wasn't because I really was unapproachable. It's just the look I had on my face, or the tone in my voice, or the way that I carried myself. I just didn't seem approachable. And so we just have to be aware of that. If you're a person that people often ask, are you mad? Is everything okay? It may be because of the look on your face. Now, can you help that? No. Do we need to sit around having a fake smile 24/7? No. But if we're going into an important conversation, we just need to be aware that people may misread us. And so we have to be very open and honest with our feelings and our emotions, and not try to hide it, not try to minimize it, but just be honest. The next one is to avoid speaking from a place of defensiveness. If you are speaking from a place of defensiveness, it can shut down the conversation every single time. We do not want to have defensive conversations. If you are in a place of defensiveness, you need to take a time out, go be with the Lord for a little while, pray through it, come back, and try again. Avoid using the silent treatment as punishment. If you need a break to verbally express your need, place a specific time for the time break. Sorry, I'm trying to read and talk at the same time. So if you are a person that it takes a little bit to gather your thoughts and you don't want to react from a place of emotion, it's okay to say, listen, I need 10 minutes to go in my prayer closet. I'm going to pray for a little while, 10, 20, 30, however long it takes you. I'm going to go pray for a while. I'm going to gather my thoughts, and then I will come back to this conversation. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. But what is not okay is if the other person makes you mad and you just shut down and you just do the silent treatment and you won't speak at all. It's not fair. It's not fair to the other person. It's not fair to your relationship. And it's a form of being passive aggressive, and we need to avoid that. So explain yourself. Let them know why you need your time away. Do that, then come back to it. Make sure you make it clear to the listener it's not because they've been bad that you need a break. It's more about your personal need to get alone with God. That it doesn't really have anything to do with them, but it has to do with you and your heart, especially if it's your child. Especially if it's your child. You don't want them to feel like that you shut down and you push them away because they're bad. They have to understand that they are loved and that you want to talk to them, but sometimes you just need a break to gather your thoughts and gather yourself. And even with your husband or your coworkers, whoever it is, you don't want them to feel like that you've just shut them out completely. You want to let them know why. Avoid having conversations with the only intent of proving your point. You can make a point without hitting the listener over the head with your point. Be gentle and understanding in your approach, and have conversations with the goal in mind to better understand one another's point of view. You want to always go into a conversation wanting to understand the other person. Even if they have done something wrong and you have the receipts and you know they've done it wrong, you still want to go into conversations to understand the other person. If they are from a completely different viewpoint than you, and you guys are talking about heavy topics, you still want to come to an understanding of how they feel, what their intentions are, what their understanding is. It's still about understanding them on a personal level. The next one is do not keep scores of wrong done by the other person to use when you have a heated conversation. Keep focused on the topic at hand and resist the urge to bring up the past and the long list of past behaviors. If the topic is about patterns in the person's life, then it would be appropriate to bring up the past and current patterns, but do it from a place of love and understanding and not anger, judgment, accusation. So we don't want to get in an argument with somebody and start listing all of the 1,000 ways they've messed up over the past 10 years. And that's so easy to do. It's such an easy thing to do, because what we normally a lot of times will do is we will bottle it up. The first time they do something, we bottle it up. The second time, we bottle it up. The third, fourth, 10, 20th, bottle it up. Then 21, we explode and we vomit emotionally all over them and we just lay it out. Well, back in 1995, you said this and you did this, and we just let the whole thing rip. That's not fair. Back then, at number 1, we should have had an honest and open conversation about it and got it out in the open. It's not fair to let all of that go for all of that time and then explode on them and vomit all of that for every single wrong they've ever done. We need to be having open and honest conversations as we go and not do that explosion. So if you have an important topic to discuss and you know you need to have a very deep and important discussion, plan ahead and set time aside that is uninterrupted for that discussion. Don't start important conversations if you don't have the time to spend for the full discussion. Like don't know in your mind you want to talk about something major as soon as they walk through the door, but you only have 10 minutes. So you unload on them and then you're like, no more time, let's go. Don't do that. If you have an important conversation, make sure you have time to sit down so you both will have time to share. Don't start the conversation if you're experiencing strong emotions. Pray first and make sure you have your emotions under control. Respond with the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Respond in the fruit of the Spirit every time and not your flesh. Stay fully present for every conversation you have. Make sure you're maintaining eye contact. Have open body language and stay engaged. Don't allow your mind to wander, check out, or get distracted. So, open body language, this would be open. I'm considered right now, this would be open body language. I'm open, I'm listening, I'm leaning forward, I'm making eye contact, I'm engaged, I'm hearing what you're saying. Closed body language would be something like this. Turning away from them, not looking at them, looking out the window, getting on your phone, doing something like that. We want to stay open. We want to stay engaged. We want our body language to show them we're here, we're present, we want to talk, we're uninterrupted, we are not getting on our phone. You're important. I'm listening. I'm here. Let's talk. And we want to keep it that way. Ask open-ended questions to better understand the other person's point of view. You don't want to ask closed questions that would give you just a yes or no answer. You want to do open-ended. For example, what do you mean when you say blah, 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 blah? That's not a yes or no answer. They're going to have to come back with I feel, I think, or something along those lines. Is this what you mean when you say blah, 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 blah? Is this what is the feeling behind this action? How did you feel when? What did you think when? What was your reasoning behind? You want to ask open-ended questions. The last one is to periodically summarize for clarity what the person is saying so you can make sure you're both on the same page. This is something that I do all the time. If you talk to me for any amount of time, you will hear me do this. I do this whenever I'm messaging people. It's a habit. I think it comes, I don't know, it may predate when I was a therapist. I don't know, but it definitely comes from being a therapist. I will summarize and say, oh, you're saying that they really hurt your feelings because blah, blah, blah. Or I will ask for more details. I do that all the time too. If someone is telling me something, before they even say the whole thing, when they pause, I will ask for more clarity. How did that feel when that happened? Oh, wow, that sounds really difficult, or whatever it is. I'm always looking for deeper meaning. I'm always looking for what is the emotion behind what they're saying? What is the feeling behind what they're saying? What was the reasoning or the intent behind what they're saying? So the bottom line is we just need to be intentional in our conversations. We need to be intentional in our relationships, and we need to work on ourselves, because there's always something that we can do better. There's always something that we can learn. The people around us may not change at all, but we have to be concerned about ourselves. And how are we going to change? How are we going to do different? How are we going to be better? How are we going to grow as a person? How are we going to mature? How are we going to mature as people? And how are we going to mature in the Lord? I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me anytime, and you all be blessed.